Our delegates at the Human Rights Conference in Botswana have called on countries to ensure that their human rights are protected and defended. The theme of the conference, Reimagining the Future of Human Rights in Africa, is aimed at securing gains that have been made on culture of human rights on the continent. SABC News Specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena spoke to Unity Dow, who's a former High Court judge who is now a member of Parliament in Botswana.
How important is this conference?
It's very, very important. It's important for this country. Botswana is very important because following the elections of 2024, with the government carrying the flag of human rights, as its rallying cry, this is the first big conference on that particular issue. And it's important because of the topics it covers. Yesterday we were covering issues, technology. We covered the issues of gender and inclusion. We're talking about the topic of land access, land use, land rights in Africa and in general, but in Southern Africa in particular. So it's very, very important. And also brings different actors. It's not a government conference. It is not just a non-governmental conference. It is not about academics only. It's really a collection or convening of people from different backgrounds and different sectors. So that's very important as well.
You've just come out of a session on land. What are the key issues when you look at human rights as it pertains to land question? We know that the land question, it's quite a thin issue. I mean, South Africa is grappling with the issue of land question. We have a situation in Zimbabwe where the land question led to many challenges, the redress thereof.
Mm-hmm. I think, it's very important. Land is important because, we all have to stand somewhere on land. We all have to sleep somewhere on land. We all have to produce food somewhere on land, so you can't float in the air. So you need a space, as a human being, to anchor yourself. So land is very important. And if you look historically, there are historical issues about land in Southern Africa. And so the discussion is about redressing some of those past injustices. People talking about not just about the past injustices, they're talking about even today zoning and planning for land that actually is responsive to the needs of people, who live in these communities, and also managing the tension between the idea that I'll just give an example. Riverbanks are great places to build beautiful houses, which is the kind of the received law, maybe the Western vision of what a riverbank is supposed to do. And then the vision of a villager who believes that a riverbank is something that's shared, is a commons, and therefore nobody should be there. And therefore these tensions have to be worked out all the time. But at the end of the day, when you imagine the future of Africa, where everyone, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of class, has access to fertile and or useful or usable land. And when we talk about land, we're not talking just about, we're also talking about mining land. We're talking about access to resources that come from the land itself. So it's a very, very broad topic, and it's a very important topic. And of course, I don't know whether you're in the room, but it really creates tensions and emotions, and also tempers flare up because it is a very emotive issue.
The liberation organizations in the southern region, we know that many, when they were formed, for example, the South African Native Congress in 1912, now it's the African National Congress, the four bears, the intention was to ensure that they push back on colonialism, but the struggle got intensified. In 1913, when they were dispossessed land, and that has been the main focus, and that has been the main issue of contestation, the land. But when they get into power, there are challenges. Do you think those who are now liberated are still putting the question of land as a priority?
I'm not going to say they are not. And I'm going to borrow the words of one of the moderators today, talking about what is plausible, and what is possible. we know it's plausible to think that we can actually reclaim that land. Is it really possible to do it? When you look at current laws, when you look about how far we've gone, where people now are kind of set in their own ways. So it's plausible, but is it possible to actually return people to their land? I don't think so. But it doesn't mean that you cannot begin to say, if it is not possible to go back to my farm, to go back to my land that was, my ancestors were removed from 100 years, 50 years ago, what can the state do to make sure that my children and my great-grandchildren do not continue to descend into poverty?